Ekene crouched low in the shadows, his heart hammering in his chest as he peered over the freshly dug grave. The village had just buried a wealthy elder, and with him, the traditional gold coin meant to pay his passage to the afterlife. Earlier that day, Ekene's stomach tightened with hunger. He had gone days without a decent meal, and the thought of what that coin could buy was too tempting to resist. The spirits of the dead? Superstitions. He told himself it was nothing but an old tale to scare children. With a final glance around to make sure no one was watching, he shoved his trembling hands into the loose earth and began digging. The scent of damp soil filled his nostrils. His fingers soon brushed against cold, stiff flesh. He swallowed hard and forced himself to continue, prying open the elder's lifeless mouth. There it was, the glint of gold against gray lips. Ekene hesitated for only a moment before snatching the coin. The second it left the dead man's mouth, the air grew colder. A shiver ran down his spine, but he ignored it. Pocketing the coin, he quickly covered the disturbed soil and slipped away into the night. Behind him, the graveyard remained still, but deep beneath the earth, something shifted. Morning sunlight streamed through the cracks in Ekene's mud hut, but he felt no warmth. He sat on the edge of his sleeping mat, staring at the gold coin in his palm. It was heavier than he had expected, its surface smooth yet strangely cold. This was his key to a new life. Food, new clothes, maybe even enough to leave the village and start fresh. Determined, he tucked the coin into his waist pouch and set off for the marketplace. The village square bustled with life. Merchants shouted their prices. Children ran barefoot through the dusty paths, and the smell of roasted yams filled the air. Ekene approached the first trader, an elderly man who dealt in precious metals. "I have something valuable," Ekene said, pulling out the gold coin. Pure gold. The merchant barely glanced at it before his expression darkened. "Where did you get this?" Ekene hesitated. "It was given to me." The merchant took a step back. "I will not touch it." Confused, Ekene moved to another trader, and another. Each time, the response was the same. Fear, avoidance, refusal. Frustration simmered in his chest. How could they not want gold? As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Ekene returned home, his mood sour. He flung the coin onto his mat and lay down, staring at the thatched roof above. The villagers were fools. Tomorrow, he would find another way. Just as sleep began to claim him, a sound whispered through the hut. "Ekene!" His eyes snapped open. He held his breath, listening. The night was silent. He must have imagined it. Then, his oil lamp flickered, though there was no wind. The shadows in the room stretched unnaturally, shifting in the dim light. A chill crept over his skin. Someone or something was watching. Ekene sat upright, his heart pounding against his ribs. The whisper had been real. He was sure of it, but no one was there. The dim light from his oil lamp barely illuminated the corners of his hut, where the shadows seemed darker, deeper than they should be. He swallowed hard and reached for the coin, gripping it tightly as if it could protect him. The whisper didn't come again, but a strange unease filled the air. He could feel something watching him, something unseen, just beyond his vision. Then, movement. His eyes darted to the farthest corner of the room. The shadows shifted, slithering like living things. A cold sweat broke across his skin. Ekene squeezed his eyes shut. "It's just my imagination. I'm tired. That's all." When he opened them again, the shadows had returned to normal. His hut was quiet. Shaking off the fear, he lay back down and forced himself to sleep. But the nightmares came. He was back in the graveyard, standing over the open grave. The dead man's mouth opened wide, revealing the empty space where the coin had been. Bony fingers reached out, grasping at his legs, pulling him down into the earth. Ekene jolted awake with a strangled gasp, his body drenched in sweat. His lamp had gone out. The room was completely dark, but there, in the silence, he heard it again. A whisper, "Return what you stole." The shadows shifted once more, and this time, they were moving toward him. The next morning, Ekene left his hut with bloodshot eyes. He hadn't slept. The whispering voice, the shifting shadows, they had kept him frozen in terror all night. He needed answers. His feet carried him toward the river, a place where he could clear his mind. The village river was a sacred place, where the elders said spirits often wandered, watching the living. Ekene didn't know if that was true, but right now, he needed any kind of peace he could find. As he reached the riverbank, He bent down and splashed cold water onto his face. The chilling sensation grounded him, offering a moment of relief. "You cannot wash away the dead, boy." Ekene flinched and spun around. An old woman stood behind him, dressed in tattered brown robes. Her back was slightly bent, and her eyes, cloudy yet piercing, seemed to look through him. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She tilted her head. "The dead do not forget." Ekene's heart dropped. His mouth went dry. What are you talking about?" The old woman took a slow step forward. "You have stolen their passage. The coin was meant to pay for the journey to the afterlife. Without it, the dead remain restless." Ekene staggered back. "Who told you that?" The woman's cracked lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. "They did." A chill ran through Ekene's spine. "You're crazy," he muttered, turning away. "Leave the village," the woman called after him, "before it is too late." Ekene quickened his pace, refusing to look back. As he reached the village path, a wind howled through the trees, carrying a whisper that sent ice through his veins. "Return what you stole, before they take it from you." That night, Ekene bolted his door and secured every window in his hut. The old woman's words echoed in his head. "The dead do not forget." He tried to push the thought away, convincing himself that she was just an old village lunatic. Yet, deep down, fear gnawed at him. Eventually, exhaustion weighed him down, and he drifted into a restless sleep. But the nightmares came almost immediately. In the dream, Ekene was in a dark graveyard, the same one where he had stolen the coin. Thick fog covered the ground, swirling around his legs like ghostly fingers. A deep voice whispered from the shadows, "Why did you take it?" Ekene turned in every direction, but there was no one there. His breathing became ragged. Suddenly, the earth beneath him cracked open, and rotting hands burst out of the soil. Decayed fingers grabbed his ankles, pulling him down. He screamed, clawing at the dirt, but more hands emerged, dragging him deeper into the grave. The scent of death filled his nostrils. He could see them now. Faces of the dead, their hollow eyes staring at him, mouths moving without sound. Then, amidst the bodies, he saw the corpse he had stolen from. Its lips were moving, whispering something. Ekene leaned in, unable to stop himself. "Return the coin." Before he could react, the corpse's eyes snapped open. A bony hand shot out, grabbing Ekene's throat. In reality, Ekene wakes up. He woke up gasping, his body drenched in sweat. His heart pounded violently against his ribs. His hands trembled as he sat up in bed, trying to catch his breath. Then, his eyes drifted down to his hands. His fingernails were packed with dirt, as if he had been digging. Terror gripped him. Was it just a nightmare? Or had he actually? A cold wind blew through his hut, snuffing out his lamp. And in the darkness, he heard it again, a whisper, "Give it back." Ekene sat frozen in his bed, his breath shallow. The whisper had been real, too real. His entire body was covered in sweat, yet his skin felt ice cold. His first instinct was to flee, but he told himself, "I need to go back to the graveyard and return the coin." The village was silent, except for the distant hoot of an owl. The moon cast long shadows across the footpaths as Ekene made his way toward the graveyard. Every rustling leaf made him flinch. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had always feared this place like every villager did. But tonight, that fear had teeth. When he finally reached it, his heart stopped. The grave was open, not dug up but torn apart. Deep claw marks gouged the dirt, as if something had crawled out. The body was gone. Ekene staggered backward, his breath coming in sharp gasps. No, this is impossible. But the evidence was right before him. The corpse he had stolen from was no longer resting in its grave. Something had woken up, and it was looking for him. Ekene stumbled backward from the open grave, his chest heaving. His legs threatened to give out beneath him. He turned wildly, expecting to see something or someone watching him from the shadows. But there was nothing. Just the wind moaning through the trees and the distant sound of crickets. "This can't be real," he whispered. But the clawed earth, the shattered coffin, the missing corpse, they were all very real. The dead man he had stolen from was gone, and Ekene knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was looking for him. A desperate search for answers. Ekene ran. He didn't care how he looked. If anyone saw him bolting through the village in the middle of the night, he had only one thought, and it was to find help. There was only one man in the village who might understand what was happening. Papa Nwosu, the old diviner. The elder's hut was tucked away at the edge of the village, surrounded by thick trees. Ekene burst through the entrance without knocking, panting. Papa Nwosu sat cross-legged before a small fire, his face unreadable beneath the flickering glow. His old milky eyes slowly lifted to meet Ekene's panicked gaze. "You have disturbed the dead," Papa Nwosu said before Ekene could even speak. His voice was a low rumble, ancient and knowing. Ekene froze. "How do you?" he began. But Papa Nwosu raised a hand to silence him. "The spirits whisper. They scream through the night. They are restless, boy." Ekene shuddered. I stole a coin," he admitted. "From a grave. I didn't know." Papa Nwosu's expression darkened. "You have done something far worse than theft, Ekene. You have stolen the dead's passage." Ekene's throat tightened. "Passage?" Papa Nwosu sighed. He reached into a small wooden bowl, scooping out a handful of white chalk. He blew it into the fire, and instantly, the flames roared higher, shifting into an eerie blue. "When a person dies," the old man said, "they must pay for their journey into the afterlife. The coin placed in their mouth is their offering, their toll. Without it, they cannot cross over." The fire crackled, casting eerie shadows across the walls. "You have trapped that soul in between worlds, Ekene. And now, it is searching for what was stolen." Ekene's stomach churned. "But I just wanted to sell the coin. I didn't know it would." "Ignorance does not matter to the dead." Papa Nwosu leaned forward, his cloudy eyes locking onto Ekene's. "If you do not return what you have stolen, the dead will take something of equal value in exchange." A chill ran down Ekene's spine. What does that mean?" "It means, boy, the spirit will take your life instead." He grabbed Papa Nwosu's arm. "Then tell me what to do. How do I stop this?" Papa Nwosu hesitated. Then slowly, he spoke. "There is only one way to make peace with the dead. You must return the coin through a ritual." Ekene nodded quickly. "I'll do it, whatever it takes." But Papa Nwosu's face remained grim. "The ritual must be performed in the graveyard," he said. "At midnight. That is when the spirit is strongest." A lump formed in Ekene's throat. "And if I fail?" Papa Nwosu looked into the fire. "Then the grave will not remain empty for long." Ekene swallowed hard. The spirit was coming for him. And if he failed, he would be buried in its place. Ekene left Papa Nwosu's hut with trembling hands, the old man's words echoing in his head. "Return the coin, or the spirit will take your life." But how was he supposed to return a coin to a grave that no longer held a body? As he walked through the village, the air felt different. The village, once familiar, now felt like a cage. He reached his hut and hesitated. For the first time in his life, he didn't want to go inside. But the night air was growing colder, biting at his skin like unseen fingers. He had no choice. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The hut was dimly lit by his oil lamp, but something felt wrong. He sat in the corner undisturbed, yet it felt as if someone had been there. Ekene slowly placed a coin on a wooden table. He didn't know why, but he couldn't stand to keep it in his pocket any longer. He sat on his cot, rubbing his face. His body was exhausted, but his mind raced. Then something scratched. His eyes snapped open. The sound had come from under the bed. A cold sweat broke out on his skin. He leaned forward slowly, heart pounding, and peered beneath the cot. Nothing, just darkness. But then he heard scratch for the second time. The sound came again, louder this time, right beneath him. Ekene leaped up, knocking over the oil lamp. The light flickered, casting wild shadows across the hut. Then he saw it, a hand, pale, rotting, reaching out from the darkness under the bed. Ekene's scream caught in his throat as the fingers twitched, dragging across the dirt floor with an agonizing slowness. Then, the hand lunged. Ekene stumbled back, kicking at the air, crashing into the table. The coin clattered to the ground. The hand stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the hand retreated, disappearing into the shadows. The hut went still. The only sound was Ekene's ragged breathing. But he knew the spirit wasn't gone. It was waiting, and it wouldn't wait forever. Ekene didn't sleep. He couldn't. He sat in the corner of his hut, gripping his knees, watching the floor like a man expecting death to rise from it. When the first light of dawn broke through the cracks in his hut, he was still alive. But for how much longer? He needed to act. Still shaken, he forced himself to stand and approached a small mirror hanging on the wall. He needed to see himself, to remind himself that he was still real. But when he looked into the mirror, his reflection didn't move. Ekene froze. His own face stared back at him, wide-eyed, breathing heavily, but its chest did not rise and fall. Then, the reflection smiled. A slow, sickening grin stretched across its face. But Ekene hadn't moved a muscle. His breath caught in his throat. Then the reflection spoke. "You stole from the dead." Ekene stumbled back as the voice filled the room, low and rasping, not his own. "Now, the dead will steal from you." Ekene fell to the floor, panting, his heart hammering against his ribs. The room fell silent again. But Ekene knew the spirit wasn't just haunting him anymore. It was inside his house, inside his mind, and soon, it would be inside his body. Ekene ran through the village, his breath ragged, his mind spiraling. The whispers, the shadowy hand, and the thing in the mirror run through his mind. The spirit wasn't just haunting him anymore. It wanted him. He burst into Papa Nwosu's compound, falling to his knees. "You have to help me. It's getting stronger." The old diviner, already expecting him, nodded grimly. "The spirit has now marked you. It won't stop until the debt is paid." Ekene's body trembled. "Tell me what to do." Papa Nwosu reached for his staff, his wrinkled fingers tracing the carved symbols. "There is only one way. You must return the coin and beg for mercy. But be warned, the dead do not forgive easily." Ekene swallowed hard. "Where do I return it? The grave is empty." Papa Nwosu's expression darkened. "The spirit has not left this world. It still lingers at the place of its burial, waiting for what was stolen. You must go there, at midnight." The words felt like a death sentence. But Ekene had no choice. If he didn't return the coin, the spirit would take him instead. The wind howled through the trees as Ekene stood at the edge of the graveyard, clutching the cursed coin. Behind him, Papa Nwosu chanted in a low, ancient tongue. A small fire flickered between them, casting eerie shadows on the tombstones. Ekene took a shaky step forward. His body screamed at him to run, but the whispers in the wind called his name. "Ekene, you cannot run from us." His grip tightened around the coin. "Ekene, you took what was not yours." Then, the ground shifted. A skeletal hand emerged. Ekene gasped, stumbling backward. Another hand clawed its way up. Then a rotting face surfaced, hollow eyes staring at him. "The spirit has come." The corpse rose. It stood before him, barely human. Its skin stretched thin over decayed bones. Its jaw unhinged in an unnatural grin. "My passage. You stole my passage." The spirit rasped, stepping forward. Ekene's knees buckled. "I am here to return it." He held up the coin, his hand shaking violently. "Take it back." The spirit tilted its head, as if studying him. Then, it lunged. Ekene screamed, throwing the coin toward the grave. The spirit stopped just inches from his face. For a moment, there was silence. The wind howled. The ground quaked. Ekene fell to his knees, covering his ears. The fire around Papa Nwosu flared, his chants growing louder. The spirit twisted, writhing, its skeletal fingers reaching toward Ekene, and then it was gone. The grave sealed itself. The whispers stopped. The night was silent again. Ekene gasped for air, his heart slamming against his ribs. It was over, or so he thought. Behind him, Papa Nwosu whispered, "The dead have taken back what was theirs, but your debt is not yet paid." Ekene's blood ran cold. Then why did he still feel something watching him?